6. In view of the immense problem which we are about to discuss, this excursus on pleromatic events is not out of place as an introduction. What, then, is the real reason for the incarnation as an historical event? In order to answer this question, we have to go rather far back. As we have seen, Yahweh evidently has a disinclination to take his absolute knowledge into account as a counterbalance to the dynamism of omnipotence. The most instructive example of this is his relation to Satan. It always looks as if Yahweh were completely uninformed about his son's intentions. That is because he never consults his omniscience. We can only explain this on the assumption that Yahweh was so fascinated by his successive acts of creation, so taken up with them, that he forgot about his omniscience altogether. It is quite understandable that the magical bodying forth of the most diverse objects, which had never before existed in such pristine splendor, should have caused God infinite delight. Sophia's memory is not at fault when she says, "When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was by him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight." The book of Job still rings with the proud joy of creating when Yahweh points to the huge animals he has successfully turned out. "Behold, behemoth, which I made as I made you." He is the first of the works of God, made to be Lord over his companions. So even in Job's day, Yahweh is still intoxicated with the tremendous power and grandeur of his creation. Compared with this, what are Satan's pinpricks and the lamentations of human beings who were created with the behemoth, even if they do bear God's image? Yahweh seems to have forgotten this fact entirely. Otherwise, he would never have ridden so roughshod over Job's human dignity. It is only the careful and far-sighted preparations for Christ's birth which show us that omniscience has begun to have a noticeable effect on Yahweh's actions. A certain philanthropic and universalistic tendency makes itself felt. The children of Israel take something of a second place in comparison with the children of men. After Job, we hear nothing further about new covenants. Proverbs and gnomic utterances seem to be the order of the day, and a real novum now appears on the scene, namely apocalyptic communications. This points to metaphysical acts of cognition, that is, to constellated unconscious contents which are ready to erupt into consciousness. In all this, as we have said, we discern the helpful hand of Sophia. If we consider Yahweh's behavior up to the reappearance of Sophia as a whole, one indubitable fact strikes us: the fact that his actions are accompanied by an inferior consciousness. Time and again we miss reflection and regard for absolute knowledge. His consciousness seems to be not much more than a primitive awareness which knows no reflection and no morality. One merely perceives and acts blindly, without conscious inclusion of the subject, whose individual existence raises no problems. Today we would call such a state psychologically unconscious, and in the eyes of the law it would be described as non compos mentis. The fact that consciousness does not perform acts of thinking does not, however, prove that they do not exist. They merely occur unconsciously and make themselves felt indirectly in dreams, visions, revelations, and instinctive changes of consciousness, whose very nature tells us that they derive from an unconscious knowledge and are the result of unconscious acts of judgment or unconscious conclusions. Some such process can be observed in the curious change which comes over Yahweh's behavior after the Job episode. There can be no doubt that he did not immediately become conscious of the moral defeat he had suffered at Job's hands. In his omniscience, of course, this fact had been known from all eternity, and it is not unthinkable that the knowledge of it unconsciously brought him into the position of dealing so harshly with Job in order that he himself should become conscious of something through this conflict, and thus gain new insight. Satan, who, with good reason, later on received the name of Lucifer, knew how to make more frequent and better use of omniscience than did his father. It seems he was the only one among the sons of God who developed that much initiative. At all events, it was he who placed those unforeseen incidents in Yahweh's way, which omniscience knew to be necessary and indeed indispensable for the unfolding and completion of the divine drama. Among these, the case of Job was decisive, and it could only have happened thanks to Satan's initiative. The victory of the vanquished and oppressed is obvious. Job stands morally higher than Yahweh. In this respect, the creature has surpassed the Creator. As always, when an external event touches on some unconscious knowledge, this knowledge can reach consciousness. The event is recognized as a déjà vu, and one remembers a pre-existent knowledge about it. Something of the kind must have happened to Yahweh. Job's superiority cannot be shrugged off. Hence, a situation arises in which real reflection is needed. That is why Sophia steps in. She reinforces the much-needed self-reflection and thus makes possible Yahweh's decision to become man. It is a decision fraught with consequences. He raises himself above his earlier primitive level of consciousness by indirectly acknowledging that the man Job is morally superior to him, and that therefore he has to catch up and become human himself. Had he not taken this decision, he would have found himself in flagrant opposition to his omniscience. Yahweh must become man precisely because he has done man a wrong. He, the guardian of justice, knows that every wrong must be expiated, and wisdom knows that moral law is above even him. Because his creature has surpassed him, he must regenerate himself. As nothing can happen without a pre-existing pattern, not even creation ex nihilo, which must always resort to the treasure house of eternal images in the fabulous mind of the master workman, the choice of a model for the son who is now about to be begotten lies between Adam, to a limited extent, and Abel, to a much greater extent. Adam's limitation lies in the fact that even if he is the anthropos, he is chiefly a creature and a father. Abel's advantage is that he is the son, well-pleasing to God, begotten and not directly created. One disadvantage has to be accepted. He met with an early death by violence, too early to leave behind him a widow and children, which ought really to be part of human fate if lived to the full. Abel is not the authentic archetype of the son well-pleasing to God. He is a copy, but the first of the kind to be met with in the scriptures. The young dying God is also well known in the contemporary pagan religions, and so is the fratricide motif. We shall hardly be wrong in assuming that Abel's fate refers back to a metaphysical event which was played out between Satan and another son of God with a light nature and more devotion to his father. Egyptian tradition can give us information on this point, Horus and Set. As we have said, the disadvantage prefigured in the Abel type can hardly be avoided because it is an integral part of the mythical son drama, as the numerous pagan variants of this motif show. The short dramatic course of Abel's fate serves as an excellent paradigm for the life and death of a God become man. To sum up, the immediate cause of the incarnation lies in Job's elevation, and its purpose is the differentiation of Yahweh's consciousness. For this, a situation of extreme gravity was needed, a peripeteia charged with affect, without which no higher level of consciousness can be reached.